AmandaLand. We up. Wow. Ahmed, are you wearing sunglasses inside? Are you a podcast bro?
No, they're glasses that if the sun hits them, they turn a shade, and I've got a window.
I
Yeah, yeah.
was like, why is
I could
Ahmed in the
take them off.
club?
Let me take them off, so I don't look like young Jeezy.
You did
Young
look
Jeezy
like
in the club.
Hey. It is so wonderful to meet all of you, and I am so glad that we are able to make this happen. Also, this is really impressive because I feel like there's a lot of time zones here, and we all made it possible to link up. Now, Clinton, your mic is muted, so I'm going to unmute you. But you have to unmute your mic. Okay, there you go. So this vision came out of, I was interviewing Ahmed about the madness that went down with African Stream. And he was like, I've got just connection to such incredible journalists that really are ready and that should be continuing their work. And so I'm really appreciative that you all are looking to help us understand and connect. There's a lot of rhetoric that is spread across this internet in particular that seeks to separate the Black diaspora. There's a lot of effort that seeks to send this message that folks on the continent, they don't like Americans and Black Americans don't like. And it's like, well, there's people that don't like people everywhere. That doesn't have to be the sentiment, though, that we prioritize. And I think one of the best ways to challenge this is information and connectivity and understanding others' experiences. So without further ado, each of you, I'd love for you to introduce yourselves and where you are located, because for those of y'all who weren't here in the beginning, what's going to be happening moving forward is that once a month, one of these lovely individuals will be joining us to give us an Africa tap in and give us basically the 60-second headlines of the continent. So let's start with you, Ahmed.
Sure. So my name is Ahmed Kaballo. I describe myself as a Sudanese born in the UK. I am the former founder of African Stream, where I met the wonderful guests that are joining the stream today. I'm based in Nairobi with Clinton and William, and it's currently 6:40 p.m. in Nairobi.
Nice. I don't want to mispronounce your name, Miss Richardson, so teach me.
Okay. Thank you so much. My name is Inem Richardson. I'm super happy to be on here. I split my time between Burkina Faso and Niger. I am a journalist with African Stream. I've covered all sorts of different things, but really a lot of stuff related to the Alliance of Sahel states. I grew up in the Bay Area. I'm a product of the Nigerian diaspora, but I have had the incredible opportunity to be in the Sahel for the past 4 years and to see the rise of the Alliance of Sahel states firsthand. I'm also the co-founder of the Thomas Sankara Center, aka Burkina Books. If you want to check us out on Instagram, we are bringing revolutionary Pan-African materials into the Sahel. It's a lending library, political education center. And I'm a member of the All African People's Revolutionary Party, AAPRP.
My cat's name is Thomas Sankara.
Awesome.
Well, actually, Palmas Sankara. So it's Palmas Sankara.
Even better. So cute.
And my other kitten's name is Patrice Lumumba. But no big deal. William.
My name is William Sakawa. Very, very honored to be here, Miss Amanda.
Thank you.
I describe myself as a socialist, as a journalist. I believe that, as many people do, Africa has problems. Africa has very big problems. And a big part of understanding how to change it is knowing the story, knowing what happened, just basically having context. And so, yeah, I think our work is very useful to that end, to revealing the hidden, what basically the status quo doesn't want to be known. But yeah, to keep it short, I'm an African, very passionate about liberating Africa.
And are you from Kenya?
Yes, I'm from Kenya.
Jumbo.
Jumbo.
Actually, I did get these in Nairobi. Oh, by the way, yeah, I'm giving you, I was like, I know who's coming on the show today. So this This is my what brand is this? This is damn, I'm blanking, but it's from South Africa. All right, Clinton.
Yeah, my name is Clinton Nzala. I am a Zambian, but currently living in Nairobi. I was one of the journalists at African Stream. I'm a very passionate Pan-African. I'm a firm believer that the starting step for Africa to move forward will be uniting the continent, as I believe that most of our problems can be solved by us uniting and working together as one people on the continent and in their diaspora.
Quick. All right. By the way, it's Mexico. I can never get that. Mexico. Meclosa. There it is. Meclosa by Laduma. So it's so great to have you all here. So let's jump into it. I mean, what do you feel is happening on the continent that we need to know about? Especially, I would love to hear, particularly from you, Inem Richardson, about Burkina Faso, because someone told me that they felt like, a Senegalese told me that they felt like the stories around Burkina Faso, around, just the movement is being portrayed in a glossy way that's not really honest. And so I would love to know your thoughts on Ibrahim Traoré, and as somebody who's on the ground, the truth behind that, etc. So, but in general, I want to hear from you guys from where you all are in the world and what is actually headlining where you all are.
Okay, cool. So I'll jump in to talk about, Burkina Faso and Ibrahim Traoré, and also the Alliance of Sahel states at large. And, I feel a lot of pressure anytime I talk about this, because it's really hard to capture just the tremendous transformations that I've been able to witness over the past 4 years. And I understand that, for some people from the outside who maybe come into Burkina Faso after seeing, these images on social media, they're like, oh, this is it. But you have to really understand, from the people's perspective, how incredible these transformations are. We're talking about one of the most super exploited regions on the planet Earth, and also one of the most, up until recently, militarized parts of Africa. We're talking about not just Burkina Faso, which I know it gets the most attention, but we're talking about 3 countries that have come together to form a Pan-African project at the hands and the calls and demands of the peoples on the grassroots level. We are seeing an incredibly rapid process of industrialization in Burkina Faso. And what I mean by that is, I'm not talking about bullet trains or flying cars and stuff like this, because I know I get images sent to me. I'm talking about people being able to control their food source for the first time. I'm talking about control over local production. I'm talking about a diversification of the economy that's happening not just in the capital where I live, but all across the country. So there is, for example, a new dairy factory in my own neighborhood, but it's a part of a series of 5 different dairy factories that are happening, not just in the capital, but also in very remote and rural areas. There's wheat mills that are being created. There's a tomato paste factory that was inaugurated. There's cashew fruit production factories that are being created. They are refining gold in-house for the first time. They're working to develop nuclear power. These are things that I think from a U.S. perspective, we kind of take for granted, you guys have a dairy factory, what's the big deal? But you have to understand, we're talking about a part of the world that has been so exploited that, according to the, I don't like the World Bank, but I apologize, I have to quote their statistic real quick. According to the World Bank, this is a region where about 95% of people do not have any access to electricity. I don't mean power cuts, I mean zero access. So,
right.
These are big changes for people. And it's farmers who are also being impacted by this the most. These are people that maybe we don't hear from as much. They tend to not speak French. They speak the local languages. And so they have a harder time communicating with an international audience. But I've seen videos of people crying tears of joy. And, they're saying things like, this is the best yield I've had of my entire life. I've never had this level of, of crop production. These are, again, I think if you live in the US, it's okay, what's the big deal? We go into the store, we don't necessarily know where our food is coming from.
Facts.
But it's it's a huge deal for the people. And they overwhelmingly support President Traoré, but the 3 presidents as well. All 3 of them. It's not just about Burkina, it's about Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, who are coming together to fight for African unification and the liberation of African people everywhere. I mean, The diaspora is playing a role, and people are keenly aware of the importance of the diaspora. They really have a very heightened Pan-African political consciousness.
Now, you guys remember to ask your questions. You know that I expect you to be polite and respectful, and you know that that includes addressing folks as Mr. and Miss. All right? Okay, class. William, folks said that they could not hear you as well as they would like to, so I'm not sure where your mic is, but if you could just maybe like hold it up, because we got to hear what y'all got to say. So anything, actually, since we're talking to William, school us, put us on. What's popping?
Nothing much in East Africa, but just speaking to the context of what Inem said. Is my mic okay now?
Yes, fabulous.
Oh, okay. Just speaking to what Inem has said in terms of the Sahel, basically breaking the chains of neocolonialism and reclaiming their sovereignty and what this means to them. I think it's also important to note that the empire will not just go quietly into the night. While it's moving away from the Sahel, we've seen Senegal, Burkina Faso, Mali, all these other countries sort of reduce the presence of Western forces. We see the reverse happening in East Africa, where there's an additional new American base coming up. We have a handover of AFRICOM operations, because at the moment, the headquarters of AFRICOM is Germany, but the idea is basically to move into Kenya. And unfortunately, this is a role that Kenya has always played since colonialism. Even the independence we got was basically, as with many other African countries, a facade, basically placing puppets and basically putting a stop to revolution, putting a stop to what the people actually wanted, which was land, which was freedom, none of which we got. So Kenya has been very integral to the imperialist project as far as East Africa is concerned. And I think the more that it's losing ground in the Sahel, we're going to see a bigger and a bigger footprint in East Africa. And also to know that people like to be cynical about it. There's the argument that, yeah, the Americans will come over here, they'll open a base, we're going to get employment and all that. But what has the record been of American bases all right? This week, there is a case ongoing where the US government and the South Korean government are being sued for running sex trafficking rings. We have women who literally died from taking too much penicillin to treat their sexually transmitted diseases, which they're basically there to service the American soldiers who are stationed in Korea. It's the same story happening in Africa. In Kenya, precisely, we have a case ongoing. There's a woman killed in 2013, Agnes Wanjiru, 21 years old, very young, hard to drop out of school. So no one really considers this. We look at the employment, even that doesn't really matter. I mean, at the cost of losing your dignity, doesn't really add up. So yeah, we are looking at what's happening in the Sahel with admiration. We think it's a nucleus for a greater African project. We really wish them well. And it's also a call to us as East Africans to realize the fight just got a lot more serious. But yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Sorry to jump in. William, if you can just add about the case, the compensation case with the British Army base and the fire that they set and destroyed the crops. If you could just add that context as well.
Sure. I mean, basically, in addition to the human rights abuses, we have their presence here poses ecological concerns. We see the COP28, COP26, all of them whining about climate. When they're here, they use banned substances like phosphorus, which set off wildfires. There's an example from 2020 or 2022. They set fire to, I'm sorry, I can't quickly think of the amount, but it was a pretty sizable amount of land. And remember, these are people who are pastoralists. They rely on the grass to graze their animals. What happens when they no longer have access to the grazing because the British Army decided to ban phosphorus? And in addition to banning phosphorus, we have stray bullets that kill people. We have mines that do not go off and maim people. But Ahmed can maybe, I haven't really gone into the compensation. I haven't seen progress on it. Perhaps he could clarify.
You're muted.
I was trying to get the figure. I remember reading it. It was a pitiful amount.
Talking about it. It was something really. It was a pittance. It kind of. If memory serves me correct, it averaged out to like $500, maybe $50.
I think
It was
No,
some.
yeah, sorry, I just remembered. It came to $200. Yeah, it
yes.
averaged to $200. Yeah.
So that was the
Uh,
compensation that they were.
Yes.
And whenever they have to like pay compensation, how is this determined? Is this a case that is being like tried, or is it just a conversation that's being had in back rooms and then, it's just kind of said in the media to quiet people?
so
Yeah.
it's an
Sorry.
agreement between two governments where the community is completely left out. And since Kenya relies so heavily on its close relationship with the US, whatever the US, sorry, not the US, the UK, whatever the UK government or the British Army proposes, the Kenyan government is going to accept. So there's been protests since. People are saying this is a joke. You've ruined our land. What's 200? What can we do with $200? And this happens time and time again. We saw in Germany and in Namibia, there was a compensation deal, reparations of $1.4 billion, 1.4 billion euros, but it's over 30 years, and it's to be used. It's to be used on development projects. And
Which they
again,
end up getting contracts
exactly.
to do.
Exactly. And this is all about power, and this is what we're trying to emphasize, what we were trying to emphasize on African Stream. The reason why we want to unite, it's not to say that someone in Zambia is the same as someone in Kenya, or someone in Kenya is the same as someone in Burkina Faso. It's just an understanding of where we are. As we're atomized as individual states, it's very difficult for us to hold these powerful nations to account. But when we unite and we say, these are our minerals, these are our resources, this is what unless we get reparations for the continent, unless we get atonement for the continent, then we're going to stop all trade deals. We're going to close down all British controlled mines. We're going to kick out Oppenheimer and these diamond factories and these gold factories. But you can only do that if you have strength, and the strength comes when we come together. Because otherwise, what happens is, as we saw in Kenya, as we've seen in Nigeria, as we've seen throughout the continent, is that they will support campaigns of Bola Ahmed Tinubu. They'll support campaigns of William Ruto, and then they'll negotiate with Tinubu, and they'll negotiate with Ruto, and they say the Kenyan people have decided this, the Nigerian government had decided this, and it's a joke. It's a joke. We did a story on African Stream in the past about the UAE and how they're exploiting carbon credits. They're buying up land in Liberia. They're buying up land in Zimbabwe. They're buying up land, and the amount of land that they're buying in Tanzania and all these places, if you put it together, it's bigger than the size of the UK, and they're using that to offset their carbon credits. And then when we described it as land grabs, people in our comments were saying, "Oh, but the governments have agreed to this." Like, yeah, but the governments are not they're not
They're not
sovereign or
representing the people. Yeah.
they're not. Yeah, the communities have not agreed to this. We went to Liberia recently and did a 3-part documentary. The communities have not agreed to any of this stuff. So who are the governments representing? Who are they answerable to? Who are they negotiating on behalf of? And that's the biggest trick of neocolonialism. You get somebody that looks like us to negotiate and be our representative. Just to add to what William said about Korea, because it's a story that's not really got enough attention. Essentially, the reactionary forces in the south of Korea, there was an agreement made by the US. If you want us to fight the communists in the north, you need to provide our soldiers with prostitutes. Yeah, and the prostitutes, obviously,
That was a part of the agreement?
That was a part of the agreement. And so what? So these women were essentially raped because there wasn't enough prostitutes. Yeah, there wasn't enough women who were doing the job to service the need of American soldiers. So what do you think happened? People were coerced, people were forced, and here we are, 60 years, 50 years down the line, they reach a settlement about this. But it's kind of hidden. Not many people know about it. Not many people understand, and they just think, oh yeah, America was fighting in Korea, to serve freedom and to fight the big bad communist. So yeah, just thought I'd add the context.
Thank you. Clinton, you are in Kenya, but you are Zambian. What do you got for us?
First of all, I'll start by saying that I think a few decades ago, being a Zambian, carrying our Zambian flag was a source of pride because our nation was known to be the home of many liberation movements in Southern Africa and across the African continent. Most of the liberation movements, if not all, had their headquarters in Lusaka in Zambia because we had a government that was very anti-colonial and apartheid, very revolutionary. It gave a home to all these liberation movements. But 5 decades later, our country has become a source of continental, regional, and national shame. At the recent vote for Palestinian statehood, we were one of the countries that did not vote for Palestinian statehood. I think in the entire Southern African region, it was only Zambia. And this does not come as a surprise. A few weeks back, Israel just reopened its embassy in Lusaka, Zambia. So you can imagine at the time when Israel is committing a genocide before the whole world, our government thinks that this is the best time to allow Israel to reopen their embassy. This is an embassy that was closed in 1973 during the October War, because the government that we had then, literally when that war started, they were like, we can't have you guys. They closed that embassy, although it came at a huge, I think, cost, because at that time, an Israeli company was building the University of Zambia. So if today you go to the University of Zambia, you're going to find buildings that up to now have not been completed. Because what happened, the Israelis, when they were kicked out of Zambia, they went away with all the plans, the building plans. They didn't even want to hand them over to the Zambian government. So we've been unable to complete those buildings because of the pettiness of the Israeli government. But then the government that we had at that time was willing to take such a huge cost out of principle. But then our current government has turned our country into a political brothel, where literally they engage with the Western governments just for maybe personal gain. So we've turned our back on our traditional allies and went into the direction of facing the West. We've opened our minds to investors from the West who are exploiting our people, getting deals that probably many, many generations down the line will still be paying for that. But I think that just us enhancing our relations or deepening our relations with a genocidal regime has been, I think it's a source of shame. It's a source of embarrassment that at this moment is shameful to be in any political circle and to say that you're a Zambian, because almost everyone is wondering that what's going on.
But what did happen? Like, when was the turn? When was the flip?
So I think the flip happened in the 1990s. So the government that we had, the government that ended relations with Israel, the government that supported all these liberation movements, lost elections in 1991.
But did they really lose?
Yeah, actually, I was going to go to that point. Okay. Many people have questioned highly about how that election. Of course, there were a few local issues that could have made that government to become unpopular. But the extent that the loss, like the gap that between the party that won and the government that lost, was very significant to arouse some suspicions that the numbers could have been cooked in favor of a more Western aligned government that took over in 1991. So even that government, as much as it was, it kind of ended the kind of Cold War with Israel, but they were decent enough not to allow Israel to open an embassy. So most of the business was handled through the embassy here in Kenya, but they could not allow Israel to open an embassy. Then that party was in power until 2011, when we had a change of government. A new party came into power, and that party was also very transactional. It was a party when they were in China, they were the most committed communists. When they were in the US, they were the most committed capitalists. And in 2015, they kind of renegotiated the status of our relationship with Israel. So in 2015, we opened an embassy in Tel Aviv, which was widely condemned. So after that pushback, they had some reservations about allowing Israel to open an embassy. in Zambia. Mostly because of that feedback that they got from the people after it was discovered that they had opened an embassy in Israel, but they didn't close the one they had opened in Tel Aviv. So those guys remained in power and lost elections in 2021. So the new government that came is on the right of the other government. It's very right-wing, if I can put it that side. It's bad.
Right-wing in Africa sounds crazy. Like for those of us in the United States, like that conceptually is like, how?
It is. This is a government whose closest allies in the region is the Democratic Alliance of South Africa, a party that is known to be the best for the West of the West racists in South Africa. This is a party which
the worst of the worst racists in South Africa? That's a low bar.
Yeah, this is a government that is opposed to all kinds of transformational policies, almost any policy that seeks to undo the damage that was done by centuries of colonialism and decades of apartheid. The Democratic Alliance is opposed to such policies. So it would be very strange to find an African government that finds comfort to share a political bed with the Democratic Alliance. And that's a government that we have in Zambia. But they are very lucky because on the international scene, Zambia is not seen as a big player. So I think they are not getting the smack that they deserve from the masses across Africa. So they've taken many policies that go against progressive Africans, that go against the cause of most Pan-Africanists. But they do fly under the radar because most people are not paying attention to what is happening in Zambia. But I think it's one of those governments which are very retrogressive to the Pan-African dream and literally to the goals of to the anti-imperialist goal in Africa. Because most of the times they voted at the UN, they voted alongside the US, they voted alongside the Israel. So at most times when they feel a bit of shame, they will abstain. But there's no record where in the last 4 years where they voted for a progressive resolution at the UN. For decades, we always voted to end for the lifting of the embargo on Cuba. Then in the last years, most of the times when such a vote comes up, our representative at the UN, all of a sudden, he doesn't show up for the vote.
So tell me this, you guys. All of you all are in unique positions on the continent, right? In terms of like your interests, not just necessarily your physicality, right? How does the continent itself interact with each other in terms of information? So, you know, like in Europe, I mean, there's, of course, like the European Union. So that then creates this necessity for the BBC to not just talk about like the British news. It's going to talk about world news. But I know African Stream was speaking about like information in a particular context. But outside of that, are the countries more siloed, or is there an effort to, you know, kind of cross connect information? Anyone can answer.
I'd say it's regional. It's very
East,
dominated
West,
by
North, South, and
exactly. So people in Kenya will know about the political crackdown that's happening in Tanzania. They'll know about protesters being tried in military courts in Uganda. People in Nigeria will know about what's going on in Ghana. I would say maybe Burkina Faso, because Ghana and Burkina Faso border, but then there comes the language, you know, Francophone, Anglophone, and so there's a division there. And so there's actually many ways that people are not connected, which is why I believe, you know, in a very short time, we got so big, because there wasn't really somewhere that was continental wide talking about what was going on. People in the southern African region will know about what's going on in Zambia, Namibia, South Africa, Botswana. But I have been a bit kind of disappointed in my conversations how little, just to be honest, you know, Kenyans will know about what's going on elsewhere. William, obviously, notable exception outside of the continent. Maybe William, you could talk about why that is, because I was born in the UK, you're born in Kenya. So maybe it's something to do with the education system, or you can maybe enlighten us a little bit about why that is.
Sure. I think there's the educational system as well. But of course, all these rests on the foundation of colonialism, where the individual identities of all these 42 or something tribes within Kenya were erased to, if I can say that, or basically erased. Then a new identity.
You're covering your mic.
Yeah, sorry. And then this new identity was basically what the British wanted to model the Kenyan people as. And since colonialism, Kenya hasn't really managed to break out of that mold of being defined by the British. We use the British education system. We currently have an education system called a competency-based curriculum, which, as far as now, it has been a complete, utter disaster. And looking deeper into it, you realize that it's not an indigenous initiative. It's not that Kenyan educators sat down and then asked themselves, what do we want to teach our children? What is the goal of education? That didn't exist. They simply maybe copied a McKinsey report on what education in the 21st century looks like, and then went on with it. So in terms of education, the Kenyan school system does not prepare or does not teach the African child what Africa is, what African history is, the role of imperialism, the role of slavery, colonialism, neocolonialism, financial institutions like the IMF. If anything, whenever they talk about these things, it's usually in glowing terms. Like, for example, the IMF has once again bailed Kenya out of a certain disaster, certain kind of framing, which, of course, if you're the average Kenyan looking at a newspaper like that, you can't really look deeper into it. They've told you the IMF is good, simple as that. And again, as I said, this is from how the British basically modeled what Kenya is like. And then, of course, further into that, away from education, you also have the media landscape as well. You have local media, which focuses on local news, but even within the local news, there's an element of Western media, because from around 10, maybe midnight, usually they play maybe some CNN, some BBC till around 4 a.m. If you're like the upper liberal kind of person in Africa, you're most likely Western leaning. So in a way, the Western elite or the British elite also made sure that Kenya's elite only aspired to whitehood, only aspired to be like them. So that also includes how you look at the world, not actually acknowledging the fact that Kenya is not free at all. Because acknowledging it will mean knowing that, for example, why is it that Britain still has a military base in Kenya 60 something years after independence? Kenya does not have a military base in Britain. So what explains the difference? It also explains why, as Ahmed mentioned when he was looking at the dynamics of power, when the Agnes Wanjiru case, 21-year-old girl killed, left behind a 5-month-old baby. Since 2013 up to now, I don't think we even know who the perpetrator is, despite the suspect actually confessing on Facebook and bragging about it. And then someone posed the question, what if the roles were reversed? What if it was a Kenyan soldier who did that to an innocent British girl? Will it be acceptable? So just putting it how basically Kenya is under the thumb. We had a conversation with Mr. Nzala not too long ago, basically, that when colonialists came, the worst crime they did was take away our ability to envision something for ourselves. How we perceive ourselves is how they perceive us. So, yeah, understanding why Kenya does not have the perspective on current affairs, on geopolitics, how the world works, Israel, the role of the US dollar, BRICS, all that, it all ties into how colonialism basically shaped the country.
Thank you.
Sorry, there was an update. So just yesterday, the Kenyan government has issued an arrest warrant for the British soldier. Well, what they'll do, will they make it? So the difference is these things are done, but there's nothing conditional about it. And this is where the power question comes into it. So if you issue an arrest warrant, but you put no pressure on the British government to actually arrest him and hand him over, then it's a symbolic thing. So when the election year comes about and these questions are asked, you can say, yeah, well, we issued an arrest warrant back in 2025. It's just the British didn't do anything about it. But, you're meant to be a sovereign government. There are British companies that export tea out of Kenya, coffee out of Kenya, flowers out of... So there's leverage there. My frustration is, and the frustration of many Africans is, we never see any of our governments until what's going on in the Sahel ever leverage the small bit of economic power that they have because of what's being extracted out of those countries.
You guys do not put hay in the front of your questions. Y'all, I cannot stand hey. I don't even like when I get text messages that start with hey. Hey. I'm like, what? Hey, it's for horses. All right. Y'all know that I am a very proper West Indian woman. So I do not want to be addressed with hey, and I do not want my guests to be addressed with hey either. Jacqueline has a question for you, Mr. William. Mr. William, are there efforts to decolonize systems in Kenya? If so, what are resources that we can look into to support these efforts, asking as a fellow Kenyan living in the U.S.?
Resistance in Kenya, there is organization in terms of providing an alternative to the current oppressive system. We have very, very many organizations. We have social justice centers. I'll maybe just mention two. Maybe just check out the Instagram or Twitter pages of Mathare Social Justice Center, Kasarani Social Justice Center. They do amazing work with the community in terms of empowering women, in terms of maybe helping women survive beyond abusive homes, taking care of children. You can also check out Usikimye. It's run by the amazing Susan Migwi. She focuses on everything. It's not just, affairs of the women, it's men affairs, it's children. Check out Usikimwe, and also check out the amazing organizing activity by the Communist Party Marxist Kenya. So that's like 5 plugs, but should be enough to get along with.
No, my properness is not colonial residue. My properness is from being a part of a community where if you don't greet someone properly, you will hear about it later. All right. That's Americans don't understand that. In Grenada, if I'm walking up the road and I don't say afternoon, Miss So-and-so, I will hear about it when I get home later. I just want y'all to know that because y'all just have a very limited idea of how the world works. All right. Distinguished guests, NatFlow13 asks, is the awakening and movement in the Sahel from the people? We know how the West treats anti-imperialist African leaders, but the collective can keep the movement going.
I'm so glad the person asked this question because it gives me the opportunity to talk about some really important developments within the Alliance of Sahel States. So first of all, I want to clarify, everything happening in the Sahel right now, first and foremost, is a product of a mass popular people's movement. I started traveling within the region of the Sahel around 2018. And, immediately already, in 2018, I'm exposed to developing, accelerating anti-imperialist struggle against what people call there La France Afrique, which just means French neocolonialism. They're fighting against French neocolonialism. And it started with this currency called the CFA franc. There are 14 countries in Africa, technically 15. Comoros uses it, but they call it a different name. They call it the Comorian franc, works the same way. But these countries that use the CFA franc are required to hold half of their national reserves in the French treasury in Paris. And there's 2 regional banks. There's one in West Africa and one in Central Africa. France has basically de facto veto power in those banks because in order to pass financial decisions, there are certain votes that have to be unanimous. Every African country that uses the currency gets a vote, and France gets a vote. So if every country agrees, but except for France, those African countries cannot pass and move forward with certain economic decisions. So this big, leads to the emergence of this big anti-imperialist struggle within the region. And then around 2019, we see an explosion in Mali, particularly against French military occupation. So Mali was the headquarters of France's Occupation Barkhane, the Barkhane operation, which was their basically grip on West Africa as a whole, but really headquartered in Mali with a lot of troops. We see tens and tens and tens of thousands of people out in the streets calling for the former president, Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta, to be overthrown, calling for an end to France's military presence in the country, and calling for a diversification. I guess that's a nice way to put it. Calling basically to no longer collaborate with NATO countries and to collaborate with other potential countries that don't have those imperialist interests. That is what happened. That's what leads to the coup in Mali, which is a revolutionary coup. Some people get confused. Coups are more often than not reactionary in Africa, but they can be revolutionary. There have been.
Can you tell us the difference between a reactionary coup and a revolutionary coup?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's not even that hard to understand. It's, you know, who, first of all, what is the interest of the person coming to power? Are they aligned with the people? Are they working to uplift the people and their needs? Or is it somebody who's just out for a power grab? And you can usually tell pretty quickly. Thomas Sankara came up through the military. That was a coup, but it was a revolutionary coup. And he's, you know, one of the greatest leaders that Africa has ever had. Muammar Gaddafi, I know people are confused about him, you know, sometimes in other parts of the world, but, you know, in the continent, especially in the Sahel, we're not confused. You know, people are very clear. Muammar Gaddafi was actually somebody who fought on behalf of not just the Libyan people, but Africa as a whole. He also came to power via coup. That's very different from like Sani Abacha of Nigeria, who is a, you know, bloody, terrible, you know, reactionary. And so we can see the character of and also who they're aligning with. So in the context of the Alliance of Sahel states, when we see these coups, we realize immediately that they're not Western backed. We understand the West has been exploiting Africa for like, you know, 500 years now. There's never going to be an African leader that's serving the people and serving the West at the same time. So it indicates something when, you know, Western governments are freaking out, like, we don't like this guy, get him out. It's a signal. So we see this, you know, in Mali, we have Assimi Goïta comes to power. He starts collaborating not with the US, but with, you know, Russia, which the US doesn't like, but has a less exploitative relationship to the African continent, and expels France, which is exactly what the people have called for. So I just want to emphasize, like, the people called for these things. It's not like the president, some guy just came to power and he's like, I have a great idea. No, there were like tens and tens of thousands of people who are in the streets with these demands. And we see that move to Burkina Faso in terms of, when I came to Burkina Faso, everybody was paying attention to Mali. Mali was like, oh my gosh, like, this is like the dream, because it was right next door and it had done this, it had this revolutionary process start first. And so the people in Burkina Faso, also with that Sankara legacy in mind, you know, they start really fighting to have something similar. And then after Burkina Faso has this revolutionary coup, everybody is just waiting on Niger. I mean, it was so interesting to see. There was like so many false alerts. You could scroll on like TikTok and there'd be like a false coup alert in Niger that wasn't real, but everybody was anticipating it. We were like waiting for it to happen, like it was inevitable. But all that to say, you know, these are people led, you know, from the beginning. Now, I want to just talk quickly about what it looks like on the ground now in terms of how people are integrated, because it's incredible. Like I said, I grew up in the United States. I have never, ever been in a position where I have like ever defended the government of this country or been like, whoa, the president, like never. That's just, it's like antithetical.
Because, you know, they love Obama. You can't say nothing about Obama in Emerson.
It's hard, but if you know the truth, once you really understand what he's about, you realize you really cannot defend any of these presidents, none of them, none of them. But it's so different in Burkina Faso, where it's like I'm not even kidding. People would die for this president, and it's not because of him as an individual, but they have this mentality like it's for the country, like it's for the homeland. We need to protect this man. So we have something in Burkina Faso in the local language. It's called the Waïa. In French, it's la veille citoyenne, which in English is kind of like the Citizens' Night Watch. The Waïa means like come and go out. It was this mobilizing cry, like come and go out, Waïa, Waïa. And what it is basically, it was this grassroots initiative of people coming together to say, we need to protect and defend President Ibrahim Traoré and this revolutionary process as a whole, and serve as the eyes and the ears of this revolution. So they started coming out to different roundabouts, like in the capital city of Ouagadougou, as well as the other second biggest city, Bobo Dioulasso. There's roundabouts in every single neighborhood. So they created these like neighborhood stations where they come out and they go out at around 9 p.m. and they stay out into the streets until like 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning, just to like make sure that there's no funny business, everything's okay, nobody's trying to destabilize anything. And, you know, this has become a site of like popular and political education and exchange. And I mentioned the two biggest cities because that's where you see in every single neighborhood, but there are 2,000 villages and towns across the country, according to one of the leaders of this network that currently have these groups. And I've traveled the length of Burkina Faso. I've been, I've been to the south, I've been to the east, the west, you know, and I see them. They're all over the place. And so people are really organized. It's become something that is now integrated with the state in the government. Before it was just popular and grassroots, but now they actually do have like official sort of an official network that is in communication and working with the government to do this. The other thing I want to mention, and this is like incredible, it can be hard to conceptualize again, because in the US, the military is not serving the people. It's an imperialist force, right? It's mostly, killing people and carrying out U.S. interests for
Yeah.
money abroad. But in Burkina Faso, there's a different relationship with the military, but also with militarism. So I mentioned, like, I'm part of the Thomas Sankara Center, this Pan-African Library and Political Education Center, that's based in the capital city of Burkina Faso. So we often are trying to, like, recruit people to join our political education work. And sometimes, like, our neighbors who are in our communities who are working to, like, bring in will disappear for a long time. And it's like, what's going on? Like, where are you? What happened? And they'll pop up like 6-8 months later. And they'll be like, oh yeah, hey, I was a volunteer for the defense of the homeland, which is a civilian turned combatant fighting force. And so they're like, I was just on the front lines defending the country from these imperialist-backed, and this is another thing I have to get into, but these imperialist-backed death squads, what we call these terrorist organizations. These are just regular people that we know that just do this. Like, they, there's so many of them that the president has actually come out and said, like, we can't have every young person sign up. We need some of y'all to, like, focus on your studies. But people really want to, like, risk their lives to defend this process. I don't want to speak for too long because I have some incredible folks who want to tap in, but I'll just say, like, real quick, because I did touch on the terrorist thing. Like, if you come to the Sahel, there is no question that these terrorist organizations are Western backed. We first heard evidence, or we first heard this being stated explicitly in 2022, first from Mali's government at the UN General Assembly. And it was, like, mind-blowing because we hadn't heard an African leader speaking this way in so long. It was the Prime Minister of Mali coming out and saying that France was illegally violating Mali's airspace and providing arms and intelligence to terrorist organizations that they claimed to have been fighting against. And since that time, we've heard this consistently from the AES leaders, and we've heard this consistently from the majority of the people living across the Sahel. Like, they're very clear. This is not just like a Africans fighting each other thing. Yeah. That's what we see in the media. Like, if you are familiar with maybe, like, Central America's history, and I know not everybody knows, but, like, the US used to, like, back and, like, fund these death squads.
The Contras. Yeah.
The Contras, like in Nicaragua, for example, that's more what these terrorist groups are like. It's like, this is not just a random thing. These are reactionary forces that the West is using, and they've been using it as a pretext to militarily occupy the Sahel up until this point. Now they're using these sort of terrorist groups as a sort of also like a pretext, or like their message that they want is that, by attacking the Sahel right now, they want people to believe that the Sahel was better off under this previous military occupation. But it's not true. Burkina Faso has liberated significant portions of its territory. The western area, the Burkina Mali border, used to not be able to cross that. Now we can cross that safely.
Oh, wow.
Some parts of northern Mali, Kidal, which was like really like the terrorist stronghold, has been liberated. So there have been these developments, but it's also like it's an ongoing struggle because they are fighting very hard. They've moved more into Niger now. And I think, gosh, not to go on for too long, I have a lot to say. But just real quick, just last thing. I think a lot of the reason why the terrorists are also focusing now on Niger in particular is because Niger is the first African country to expel U.S. Africa Command, AFRICOM. Eritrea is one country in Africa that has never agreed to work with AFRICOM. Niger is the very first country that previously signed an agreement and then declared U.S. military presence in the country illegal. So it's being like there's a crackdown on the country right now in terms of some of the attacks that are happening. And I strongly believe that it's the message that they want is like, you were better when we were occupying you. They're trying to defeat morale, but we can't allow them to do that because it's, this is, anyways, if I start,
I want to let people know AFRICOM was headed up by the Black general who you saw come out and say, that Ibrahim Traore was using funds and disproportionately, and really tried to start something up. I don't know what's going on with my mic, but I'm going to not talk much because my mic is messed up. So, we have one more question that I want Clinton to take. How is the movement to raise awareness and push for action around the wars in Sudan and the Congo taking shape in Zambia? Unmute.
Sorry. I think generally, just the way earlier on William touched on education, for a long time in Africa, we've had a problem in that the narrative has always been driven by these Western media outlets, media organizations. So I think if you go to Zambia today, you are going to find that most of the news that is consumed, the news that even comes out from our state broadcaster, who are like the country's main broadcaster, comes out from BBC, AFP, and Reuters news wires. So literally, all the information that we have is what the Western powers want us to know. Because I think it doesn't take one to be a genius that whatever information the BBC puts out there is information that has to be approved somewhere in these powers of corridor in the West. So if the people in Zambia, if the people in Malawi, if the people in Zimbabwe, they are depending on the BBC, it means that whatever the conflict is going on in Congo, whatever conflict is going on in Sudan or any part of the continent, we are going to see it through Western lenses. So where we are told, yeah, this is just a normal day for Africans, these guys are always killing each other, that's how they are. We never get a chance to see the colonial roots of these conflicts on the continent. So this is why outlets like African Stream are very important. Or African Stream was very important, and it's a reason why so much effort was put together to make sure that we go down, because they knew that we are opening the eyes of people on the continent to see that when you see all of a sudden in Mozambique, they find billions of gas reserves, all of a sudden we've got an insurgency problem. So we were opening the eyes of the people in Africa that there is usually a connection between these people, and it made certain people uncomfortable, power forces uncomfortable. And then we saw what happened to African Stream, very tragic, but I think in the period that we are operational, we've managed to inspire many people across the continent and beyond.
Across the world.
Across the world, indeed. Because people have known, they've known that it's not just possible that we can tell our own stories in a very professional, quality, and factual manner. We've proven it. Because for a long time, in all these journalism schools across the continent, students were told that BBC reporting should be the template for professional journalism. But slowly people are waking up to say that's garbage. That's hogwash. So they realize African Stream opened the way. And it's it's an absolute pleasure to see many alternative news outlets pop up. Because not only are they popping up because they saw what we did, but I think it also enabled many people who probably for a long time they had plans to set up media outlets, but those plans remained in a drawer somehow because they were not sure if there was appetite for anti-imperialist Pan-African news. So after we did, a number of other outlets have come in and people do consume news. I was one time pleasantly surprised. So I'm in this WhatsApp group. Like back home, not even in an urban area, in a rural part of Zambia. It's most to do with issues of farming when people start buying fertilizer and whatever to plant. Then one day someone shared a news link, and it came from one of the outlets that I know that kind of collaborated with African Stream. So I was just shocked at how much they've been able to penetrate African minds in a rural part of Zambia. Someone who is not even that urbanized to say they're part of a movement, but that's just an ordinary person. But it means that now even ordinary people are starting to consume revolutionary news. Something which way back it was just something that you would find in this political studies circle of people who already had a certain kind of revolutionary conscience. But we are slowly getting there.
It's so necessary because the United States and Britain has figured out how to get to those people, right? I mean, the amount of content listen, I was in a mountain village in Togo, and there was a painting of Usher, the singer, on the side of a barbershop. And I was like, how do these people know about Usher? Because I know Usher doesn't know about this mountain village in Togo. So, it's so great to hear that you guys have managed to inspire a continent, and the biggest continent, contrary to what they've taught us here in the West. And I look forward to you all continuing to inspire us. Here in the States, we are in our own impending fascist struggle that is not going to go quietly, and it is absolutely happening in a rapid pace. And I think what's happening here is a lot of people are waking up very quickly, and they're bumping their head doing it, right? Because they can't believe what Inem said has. Am I pronouncing it right?
Yeah, Inem.
Okay, because they can't believe what Inem has always known, that this is the United Snakes, and that is a bite that has really penetrated the skin. I'm just keeping the metaphor going. I'm keeping it going. And I think what is going to be really helpful for so many folks here is getting to be able to connect with folks like you all and listen to what you all are talking about, and understanding that this is also something that they can learn about from folks who have been through this. And from nations and peoples who have been through this. And, people always say to me, like, what has Palestine ever done for Black people? And I'm like, well, actually, during the Ferguson riots, Palestinians were on Instagram and Twitter talking to people to tell them how to handle tear gas, how to deal with these police forces, because they have to deal with them all the time. And they're the same people that are training the police forces that are suppressing folks in the United States. So I really look forward to us and our relationship growing. And as I'm talking to you all, my heart is just like exploding and expanding, because I'm like, Africa. And here in the United States, I don't know Black people that don't love Africa. I don't know those Black people. Like, those are not the people that I am in community with, right? I know Black people who have flown to the continent, and as they're landing, they cry because it's like, I am home. I'm talking about me. I'm talking about me. And so moving forward, once a month, we'll connect with one of you all to give us like 3 headlines that are going on the continent, so that we can keep folks here on this North American continent connected to the struggles, to the joys, and to the movements that are happening across the Atlantic. So I look forward to doing that. And thank you once again for coordinating this, Ahmed, and making this happen. And again, for making African Stream happen to send this revolution into motion, this media revolution into motion.
Thank you for having us. We're huge fans of your work. Usually when I tell people someone wants to do a podcast, it's going to be late your time, they're like, I don't know. But as soon as I mention your name, everyone was like, yeah, I'm down. Let me be the Kenya representative.
He's talking about you, William. And by the way, William, I want you to know, if this journalism thing you're doing doesn't work out, you could be a hand model. You have perfect hands. So just know that you have a whole career that you can pivot to if need be. All right. Thank you all so much. And we will be in touch for the next Africa Tap In. I appreciate you. Amanda.